The morning started like any other at Lambrook School in Berkshire. Students were arriving with their backpacks, chatting about homework and weekend plans. The autumn sun cast golden light across the historic grounds where children from various backgrounds studied together. Among them was Princess Charlotte, the young daughter of the Prince and Princess of Wales, who had been attending the school alongside her brothers for several months. Now Charlotte had grown comfortable at Lambrook. She enjoyed her art classes and had made genuine friendships with classmates who treated her like any other student. Her teachers appreciated her curiosity and kindness. The security arrangements were discreet enough that most days felt wonderfully normal. Her parents had worked hard to ensure their children could experience school life without constant reminders of their royal status. That Tuesday morning, Charlotte walked through the entrance with her usual confidence. She wore her school uniform neatly and carried her books for the day's lessons. Her protection officer maintained his customary distance, blending into the background as he had been trained to do. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary until the headmaster's assistant approached Charlotte's classroom just before lunch. The assistant spoke quietly to Charlotte's teacher, who glanced toward Charlotte with an expression that mixed concern and confusion. Within moments, Charlotte was being gently asked to gather her belongings. She looked around at her classmates, puzzled by the sudden interruption. Her friends exchanged worried glances as Charlotte followed the assistant out of the classroom, in the hallway. Her protection officer was waiting with an intensity she had never seen before. His usually calm demeanor had shifted to something more urgent. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder and spoke in low tones that Charlotte could barely hear. The headmaster joined them, his face serious but kind. He explained that there had been a security concern and that Charlotte needed to leave the premises immediately. Charlotte's heart began to race. She thought of her brothers, wondering if they were safe. She thought of her parents and whether something had happened to them. The protection officer seemed to read her thoughts and quickly assured her that her family was fine. However, he insisted they needed to move quickly. The usual protocols were being abandoned in favor of speed as they walked through the corridors toward a side exit. Charlotte noticed other security personnel positioned at various points. Some were speaking into radios while scanning the surroundings with sharp eyes. The atmosphere had transformed from peaceful academic routine to something that felt like a whoa, carefully choreographed emergency response. Students peeked out from classroom windows, trying to understand what was happening. The protection officer guided Charlotte to a vehicle that was waiting with its engine. This was not the car she normally traveled in. Everything about this departure felt different and frightening. As they drove away from the school, Charlotte looked back at the building that had become her second home. She saw her friends standing at the windows, and tears began to well up in her eyes. During the drive, the protection officer tried to keep Charlotte calm by explaining that, sometimes, security threats required immediate action, even when they turned out to be false alarms. He told her that the most important thing was her safety, and that everyone was working to sort out the situation. Charlotte listened, but could not shake the feeling that something significant had happened. They arrived at Kensington Palace much faster than usual. The driver had taken routes that Charlotte did not recognize, avoiding the main roads entirely. At the palace, her mother was waiting at the entrance. The Princess of Wales rushed forward and embraced Charlotte tightly, holding her for a long moment before stepping back to examine her daughter's face. Inside, Charlotte learned more about what had prompted her sudden removal from school. A credible threat had been received that morning, specific enough that security officials decided immediate action was necessary. While details were being verified, the decision had been made to bring all 3 children home. Her brothers had been collected from their respective locations as well. The rest of the day passed in a blur of security briefings, phone calls, and worried conversations between adults. Charlotte sat with her brothers, trying to process what had happened. The normalcy she had enjoyed that morning felt like a distant memory. She wondered if she would be able to return to school and whether things would ever feel safe again as evening approached. Charlotte's father arrived home looking exhausted but relieved. He sat with his children and explained that sometimes their position meant facing challenges that other families did not encounter. He promised that every measure would be taken to ensure their safety while also preserving as much of their normal. childhood as possible. Charlotte wanted to believe him, but she could not forget the fear she had seen in her protection officer's eyes that morning. The following days were difficult for Charlotte and her family. She remained at home while security officials worked to assess the threat level and determine the safest course of action. Her parents tried to maintain routines, organizing lessons at the palace and keeping the children engaged with activities. However, Charlotte could sense the tension that lingered in every room. Her protection officer, whose name was James, visited her several times during those days. He had been assigned to Charlotte for nearly 2 years and had become a familiar presence in her life. James was a former military officer who had trained extensively for his role protecting members of the royal family. He was professional, but warm, and Charlotte trusted him completely. James explained to Charlotte how security decisions were made, and why her immediate removal from school had been necessary. He told her about the protocols designed to keep her safe and how many people worked behind the scenes every day to monitor potential threats. Charlotte listened carefully, asking questions that showed maturity beyond her years. She wanted to understand the world she lived in, even its darker aspects. The threat that had prompted Charlotte's removal turned out to be connected to a group that had been monitored by security services for some time. Intelligence suggested they had been planning some kind of action involving the royal family. While specific details were not shared with Charlotte, the seriousness of the situation was clear. Extra security measures were implemented around all royal residences and anywhere the children might visit. Charlotte's mother spent hours discussing the situation with her daughter. The Princess of Wales had always believed in honest communication with her children, adjusting the level of detail to what they could handle emotionally. She explained that being part of the royal family meant accepting certain realities about security and public attention. However, she also emphasized that Charlotte deserved to have a childhood filled with joy and normal experiences. The question of returning to school became a central topic of conversation. Charlotte desperately wanted to go back to Lambrook. She missed her friends, her teachers, and the sense of independence that school provided. Her brothers had similar feelings about their own routines. The children had grown to cherish the relative normalcy their parents had worked so hard to create. Security experts met with the Prince and Princess of Wales multiple times, presented various options ranging from homeschooling to relocating the children to a different institution with enhanced security features. Some suggested that the threat level had become too high for the children to attend a regular school. Others argued that with proper precautions, a return to Lambrook could be managed safely. James was present at many of these meetings. He had developed strong opinions about what was best for Charlotte based on his experience protecting her. He believed that isolating the children completely would damage their development and make them more vulnerable in the long run. Children who understood the world and had genuine relationships outside the palace would be better equipped to handle the pressures of royal life. During one particularly tense meeting, James spoke passionately about Charlotte's right to as normal a childhood as possible. He acknowledged the risks, but argued that risk could never be eliminated entirely. The goal should be managing risk intelligently while preserving quality of life. His words carried weight because everyone in the room knew he had dedicated his career to protecting these children and took that responsibility with utmost seriousness. The decision was made to implement enhanced security measures at Lambrook School and to allow the children to return. Additional protection officers would be assigned, surveillance systems would be upgraded, and new protocols would be established for emergency situations. The school administration cooperated fully, understanding the unique circumstances they were navigating. When Charlotte learned she would be returning to school, her relief was visible. She hugged her mother tightly and thanked James for advocating on her behalf. However, she also understood that things would be different. The balance between normal school life and royal security had shifted, and she would need to adapt to new realities. The night before returning to school, Charlotte had trouble sleeping. She lay in bed thinking about how her classmates might react and whether she would feel safe in the hallways and classrooms. She wondered if the threat was really gone, or if danger still lurked somewhere beyond the palace walls. Her mother came to sit with her, holding her hand and talking softly until Charlotte's breathing slowed and sleep finally came. James spent that evening reviewing security plans and coordinating with his team. He felt the weight of his responsibility more heavily than ever. Charlotte's safety depended on his vigilance and decision-making. He thought about the moment he had walked into her classroom that morning, knowing he was about to disrupt her day, but having no choice. He remembered the trust in her eyes when she followed him without question. The morning of Charlotte's return arrived with a mixture of anxiety and hope. The family had breakfast together, with her father offering words of encouragement and her brothers sharing their own excitement about getting back to their routines. Charlotte put on her school uniform with determination, ready to reclaim the part of her life that felt most like her own. The drive back to Lambrook School felt longer than usual despite taking the same amount of time. Charlotte sat quietly in the back seat, watching the familiar countryside pass by. James sat beside her, occasionally glancing her way to gauge her emotional state. He knew this return would be challenging in ways that had nothing to do with physical security. When they arrived at the school, Charlotte noticed the changes immediately. There were more security personnel positioned around the grounds, though they tried to maintain a low profile. New cameras had been installed at various entry points. The whole atmosphere felt more guarded, more watchful. Charlotte understood why these measures were necessary, but she also felt a pang of loss for the easier days. Before the threat, her headmaster met her at the entrance with a warm smile and reassuring words. He walked with Charlotte to her classroom, explaining that her teachers and classmates had been informed about her absence in general terms. They knew there had been a security matter, but no specific details had been shared. The headmaster emphasized that everyone at Lambrook was committed to making Charlotte feel welcome and safe. When Charlotte entered her classroom, there was a moment of silence as all eyes turned toward her. Then one of her closest friends rushed forward to hug her, followed by several others. The genuine affection and concern from her classmates touched Charlotte deeply. They asked if she was all right and told her how much she had been missed. For a few precious moments, Charlotte felt like just another student returning after an absence. Her teacher started the day's lessons, and Charlotte tried to focus on the material. However, she found her attention drifting to the windows and doorways. She noticed James positioned where he could observe the classroom while remaining unobtrusive. His presence was comforting, but also a constant reminder that her life was different from those around her. During lunch, Charlotte sat with her friends in the cafeteria. They talked about schoolwork and upcoming events, carefully avoiding questions about why she had been gone. Charlotte appreciated their sensitivity, but also felt the artificiality of pretending everything was normal. She wanted to share her feelings with them, to explain the fear and uncertainty she had experienced. But she knew such conversations were complicated by her position. One friend, a girl named Sophie who had become particularly close to Charlotte, quietly asked if she was really okay. Sophie had noticed the extra security and the tension that seemed to follow. Charlotte, despite everyone's efforts to act normally, Charlotte looked at her friend and saw genuine concern rather than curiosity. She admitted that things had been scary, but that she was glad to be back at school, where life felt more manageable. The afternoon classes went more smoothly as Charlotte settled into familiar rhythms. She participated in discussions and completed her assignments with focus. Her teachers treated her exactly as they had before, which Charlotte found reassuring. They maintained their expectations and standards, not offering special treatment or expressing excessive concern. This normalcy was exactly what Charlotte needed. However, when the final bell rang and students began leaving for the day, Charlotte experienced a surge of anxiety. She remembered the urgent departure from school and wondered if something similar might happen again. James appeared at her side with his usual calm presence, and they walked together to the waiting vehicle. The routine departure felt significant after what had happened. In the car, James asked Charlotte how her first day back had gone. She told him honestly about the mixed emotions, the comfort of being with friends, and the underlying worry that never quite disappeared. James listened carefully and then shared something personal. He told Charlotte that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite being afraid. She had shown real courage by returning to school. That evening at home, Charlotte's parents asked detailed questions about her day. They wanted to understand not just what had happened, but how she had felt navigating the return. Charlotte described the experience with increasing confidence. Realizing that she had handled a difficult situation better than she had expected, her father praised her resilience, noting that she was learning to balance her royal responsibilities with her personal needs. Over the following weeks, a new routine established itself. The enhanced security measures became familiar rather than intrusive. Charlotte learned to live with the extra vigilance without letting it dominate her thoughts. Her classmates adjusted to the increased presence of protection. Officers and the security protocols became part of the school's normal operations. James continued to refine his approach to protecting Charlotte while respecting her need for independence. He had developed a deep understanding of her personality and could anticipate situations that might make her uncomfortable. He positioned himself to provide security without making Charlotte feel constantly watched. This balance required constant adjustment and keen observation. Charlotte began to open up more with her friends about the realities of her life. She did not share specific security details, but she talked about the pressures of public attention and the challenge of wanting normal experiences. Her friends responded with understanding and support, strengthening the genuine friendships that Charlotte valued so highly. The school organized a special assembly about safety and community. Without referencing Charlotte's situation directly, the headmaster spoke about how everyone at Lambrook looked out for one another and how diverse backgrounds enriched their learning environment. Charlotte felt included rather than singled out, appreciated for who she was rather than defined only by her title. As autumn progressed into winter, Charlotte found herself genuinely happy at school more often than not. The fear that had dominated her thoughts after the threat began to fade, replaced by engagement with studies and activities. She discovered strengths she had not known she possessed, particularly in handling pressure and adapting to changing circumstances. Winter brought new challenges and unexpected moments of grace. Charlotte threw herself into her studies and school activities with renewed determination. She joined the school choir and discovered a love for singing that surprised even herself. During rehearsals, surrounded by classmates harmonizing together, Charlotte experienced pure joy untainted by worry about security or royal obligations. James watched these developments with quiet satisfaction. He had seen many members of the royal family struggle with the constant tension between duty and personal fulfillment. Charlotte seemed to be finding her own path, developing resilience and self-awareness that would serve her well throughout life. His role was evolving from pure protection to something more complex, acting as both guardian and mentor. One December morning, Charlotte arrived at school to find the grounds covered in fresh snow. Students were already engaged in snowball fights and building snowmen during the minutes before classes began. Charlotte hesitated, aware that James and the security team would need to assess any outdoor activity for potential risks. She looked at James with hopeful eyes, silently asking permission to join her friends. James considered the situation quickly. The grounds had been secured overnight, and his team had positions that allowed good visibility. The joy on Charlotte's face and the normalcy of the moment seemed worth the calculated risk. He gave a subtle nod, and Charlotte rushed to join her classmates in the snow. For 20 glorious minutes, she was simply a child playing in winter's first snow. Her teacher called everyone inside as scheduled. Charlotte entered the classroom with rosy cheeks and genuine laughter. Several classmates commented that they had never seen her so carefree. Charlotte realized that she had been holding herself apart emotionally, maintaining a protective distance, even with friends. The morning's play had broken through that barrier in a way she had not expected. During lessons that day, Charlotte found herself more engaged and participatory. She raised her hand more frequently, offered opinions in discussions, and collaborated enthusiastically with classmates on group projects. Her teachers noticed the shift and exchanged pleased glances. The young princess was becoming more comfortable in her own skin, more willing to take up space and contribute fully. At lunch, Sophie asked Charlotte if she wanted to come over during the holiday break. The invitation was casual, offered the same way Sophie might ask any friend. Charlotte's immediate excitement was tempered by the reality of coordinating such a visit. Security would need to assess Sophie's home, protocols would need to be established, and her parents would need to approve the arrangement. What should have been a simple playdate became a complex logistical operation. Charlotte saw the disappointment on Miss Sophie's face when she explained the complications. She hated how her position created barriers to normal friendships. Sophie assured Charlotte that she understood and that the invitation remained open whenever it could work. The exchange reminded Charlotte that despite her progress, significant challenges remained in navigating ordinary childhood experiences. That evening, Charlotte talked with her mother about the invitation. The Princess of Wales understood both Charlotte's desire to accept and the legitimate security concerns such a visit would raise. She promised to work with James and the security team to explore whether the visit could be arranged safely. Charlotte appreciated her mother's willingness to advocate for these moments of normalcy. James was consulted about the proposed visit to Sophie's home. He took the request seriously, recognizing its importance to Charlotte's social development and emotional well-being. Over the following days, he coordinated a security assessment of the location and developed protocols that would allow the visit while maintaining appropriate protection. His commitment to finding solutions rather than simply identifying obstacles demonstrated his evolving understanding of his role. The security assessment revealed that Sophie's family lived in a relatively secure neighborhood. With good access points and sightlines, the family had no concerning associations and seemed genuinely unaware of the complexity their simple invitation had triggered. James proposed a plan that would allow Charlotte to visit for an afternoon with discreet security presence that would not overwhelm the experience. When Charlotte learned the visit was approved, her excitement was infectious. She helped her mother select an appropriate gift to bring and talked extensively about what activities she and Sophie might enjoy together. The anticipation of this normal childhood experience brought out a lightness in Charlotte that the palace staff had rarely witnessed. The day of the visit arrived with perfect winter weather. Charlotte traveled to Sophie's home with James and one additional officer who would remain with the vehicle. Sophie's parents welcomed Charlotte warmly, treating her with kindness but without excessive formality. They had been briefed on basic protocols, but were clearly committed to making Charlotte feel like any other guest. Sophie had planned activities including board games, crafts, and baking cookies. The afternoon unfolded with the easy rhythm of genuine friendship. Charlotte laughed freely, engaged in playful competition, and helped mix cookie dough with flour-covered hands. James maintained his vigilant watch from a distance, pleased to see Charlotte so thoroughly enjoying herself. During cookies and hot chocolate, Sophie's younger brother asked Charlotte what it was like to be a princess. The question created a moment of tension, with Sophie's parents quickly moving to redirect the conversation. However, Charlotte chose to answer honestly. She explained that being a princess meant having responsibilities and opportunities, but also losing some freedoms that others took for granted. She spoke with maturity, but without self-pity, helping everyone understand her experience without making them uncomfortable. The visit concluded all too quickly. Charlotte thanked Sophie's family with genuine warmth and promised to have Sophie over to the palace soon. In the car returning home, Charlotte was quieter than usual, processing the afternoon's events. James asked what she was thinking, and Charlotte explained that she had realized how much energy it took to always be aware of her position and its implications. The afternoon at Sophie's had offered a glimpse of what life might be like without that constant awareness. James shared his own observations about the balance between security and quality of life. He told Charlotte that the goal was not to eliminate risk entirely, but to manage it wisely while allowing her to have meaningful experiences. Her willingness to be vulnerable and authentic with friends was valuable and should be preserved even as circumstances required vigilance. The holiday break provided time for reflection and family connection. Charlotte celebrated Christmas with her extended family, participating in traditions that had been observed for generations. However, she found herself thinking often about school and the friendships she had built there. The palace felt both comforting and confining after the freedom she had experienced at Lambrook. During the break, security officials informed the family that the group responsible for the original threat had been apprehended. Investigations had revealed their planning stages and prevented any actual danger from materializing. While this news was reassuring, it also reminded everyone that threats were real and ongoing. The vigilance that protected Charlotte and her family could never be relaxed completely. Charlotte's father used the occasion to have a serious conversation with her about the reality of their lives. He explained that their positions attracted attention from people with various motivations, not all of them positive. He emphasized that this was not her fault. that she should never feel responsible for the security measures required to keep her safe. His words helped Charlotte process some of the guilt she had been carrying about the disruption her protection caused for others. James took a few days off during the holiday, spending time with his own family. However, he remained in contact with the security team and thought frequently about Charlotte and her development. He had become deeply invested in her well-being beyond just physical protection. He saw himself as helping to shape the conditions under which she could grow into a healthy and balanced adult despite extraordinary circumstances. When school resumed in January, Charlotte returned with renewed confidence. The successful visit to Sophie's home had proven that normal friendships were possible within her unique constraints. She approached the new term with determination to fully engage in school life while accepting the security parameters that would always be present. Her teachers noticed the change immediately. Charlotte participated more actively in class discussions, volunteered for leadership roles in group projects, and showed increased willingness to take academic risks. She was becoming comfortable with making mistakes and learning from them. A crucial development for someone whose public life would involve intense scrutiny. One afternoon, a new student joined Charlotte's class. The girl was shy and clearly overwhelmed by joining mid-year. Charlotte remembered her own anxieties about fitting in and feeling safe at school. She made a point of welcoming the new student, inviting her to sit together at lunch and introducing her to other classmates. The kindness came naturally to Charlotte, reflecting values her parents had worked hard to instill, James observed. Charlotte's interaction with the new student and felt proud. Despite the privileges of her position, Charlotte was developing genuine empathy and understanding for others' experiences. She was not becoming entitled or isolated, but rather was growing more aware of her ability to positively impact those around her. School organized a winter performance, where the choir would showcase pieces they had been rehearsing. Charlotte was nervous about performing in front of an audience that would include parents and community members. While she had grown accustomed to public attention in certain contexts, this felt different. She would be evaluated on her talent and effort rather than her title. Rehearsals intensified in the weeks before the performance. Charlotte practiced diligently, working on her breathing technique and harmonizing with other singers. Her choir director praised her commitment and natural musicality. The approval felt earned rather than automatic, which made it especially meaningful to Charlotte. The night of the performance arrived with Charlotte experiencing genuine stage fright. Her parents came to watch, sitting in the audience like any other proud parents. James and his team had secured the venue, but remained as unobtrusive as possible. Charlotte stood backstage with her fellow choir members, taking deep breaths and reminding herself that she had prepared well when the choir took the stage and began to sing. Charlotte felt her nervousness transform into focus. She concentrated on the music, blending her voice with others to create something beautiful and collaborative. The performance went smoothly, and the audience responded with enthusiastic applause. Charlotte experienced a pure sense of accomplishment, untainted by her royal status. After the performance, Charlotte's parents embraced her with genuine pride. They commented on her beautiful voice and the obvious dedication she had brought to the choir. Other parents congratulated Charlotte alongside other performers, treating her as one member of a successful ensemble rather than singling her out for special attention. The evening represented everything Charlotte hoped her school experience could be. In the following days, Charlotte reflected on how far she had come since that frightening morning when she was rushed out of school. She had experienced fear, uncertainty, moments of doubt about whether normal childhood experiences were possible given her circumstances. However, she had also discovered resilience, developed genuine friendships, found activities that brought her joy. James noticed the changes in Charlotte: professional satisfaction and personal affection. He had protected members of the royal family for many years, but his assignment with Charlotte had become something more meaningful than previous roles. He felt invested in her growth and development, wanting her to have the best possible foundation for the complex life ahead, the threats that had prompted. Charlotte's emergency removal from school months earlier had been neutralized, but everyone understood that security concerns would always be part of royal life. The question was not whether risks existed, but how to manage them while preserving what made life worth living. Charlotte was learning to navigate this balance with grace and courage. One afternoon, Sophie asked Charlotte if she ever wished she could be just a regular student without any special circumstances. Charlotte considered the question carefully before answering. She explained that she sometimes did wish things were simpler, but that she was also grateful for opportunities and experiences that came with her position. She was learning to accept both the privileges and constraints of her life without resentment. Spring arrived with renewal and growth evident throughout the school grounds. Charlotte had been back at Lambrook for several months since the security incident, and the initial disruption had faded into memory. She had settled into a rhythm that balanced her royal responsibilities with genuine childhood experiences. The lessons learned during those difficult days had shaped her in ways that would last a lifetime. James had been observing Charlotte's development with increasing admiration. She had transformed from a frightened child being rushed from school to a confident young person who understood her unique position without being defined or limited by it. He had seen her navigate complex social situations, handle disappointment with grace, and show kindness to others even when facing her own challenges. One morning, James received notification that he would be reassigned to a different role within the Royal Protection Service. After nearly 3 years protecting Charlotte, he would transition to working with another member of the family. The news hit him harder than he had expected. He had known such reassignments were routine, but his connection to Charlotte and investment in her well-being made the prospect of leaving difficult. James requested a private conversation with Charlotte's parents to discuss the transition. He wanted to ensure that whoever replaced him understood not just the security protocols, but also Charlotte's personality, her needs, and the delicate balance that had been achieved. The Prince and Princess of Wales thanked James for his dedicated service and assured him that his insights would be shared with his successor. Telling Charlotte about the change was one of the hardest conversations James had ever had. He explained that reassignments were normal parts of his job and that a highly qualified officer would be taking over her protection. Charlotte's eyes filled with tears despite her efforts to remain composed. James had been a constant presence during some of the most formative experiences of her young life. His departure felt like losing someone important. Over the following weeks, James worked to prepare both Charlotte and his replacement for the transition. The new officer was experienced and capable, someone James trusted to protect Charlotte effectively. However, James knew that the relationship between a protection officer and their charge went beyond technical competence. Trust and understanding took time to develop. Charlotte tried to approach the transition with maturity, but she struggled with feelings of loss and anxiety about starting over with someone new. Sophie noticed her friend's subdued mood and offered support without prying into details. The friendship had deepened to the point where words were not always necessary. Sometimes Sophie's presence alone provided comfort. On James's last day with Charlotte, he drove her to school as he had done countless times before. The familiar route took on new significance, knowing it was their final journey together in this capacity. Charlotte was quiet during the drive, looking out the window and occasionally glancing at James, as if memorizing details she might forget. When they arrived at school, James walked Charlotte to her classroom one final time. Before she went inside, he asked if they could talk for a moment. In a quiet corner of the hallway, James told Charlotte how proud he was of her growth and resilience. He reminded her that the courage she had shown returning to school after the security incident was a testament to her character. He assured her that she would continue to thrive even as circumstances changed. Charlotte thanked James for everything he had done to keep her safe and for understanding her need to experience normal childhood moments. She told him that his advocacy for her visits with friends and his support during difficult times had meant more than he probably realized. The conversation was brief but deeply meaningful, acknowledging a relationship that had transcended professional duty. James's replacement began his assignment the following day. Charlotte was polite but reserved, needing time to adjust to this new person in her life. The new officer understood that earning Charlotte's trust would require patience and consistency. He had been briefed extensively by James and was committed to maintaining the balance. between security and normalcy that had been achieved over the following months. Charlotte gradually grew comfortable with her new protection officer. While the relationship was different from what she had shared with James, it developed its own positive dynamic. Charlotte realized that she had the capacity to adapt to change and build new connections even after experiencing loss. James moved on to his new assignment, but thought often about Charlotte and the time they had spent together. He followed news about the royal family with particular interest, pleased to see Charlotte appearing confident and happy in photographs from school events and public appearances. He had played a role in helping her develop the foundation she would need for a life of service and public attention. Charlotte continued to flourish at Lambrook School. She maintained her close friendships, pursued her interests in choir and art, and approached her studies with engagement and curiosity. The security incident that had once dominated her thoughts became one experience among many, significant but not defining. Her parents watched Charlotte's growth with pride and relief. They had worried about the impact of that frightening day when she was rushed from school, but Charlotte had proven remarkably resilient. She had learned to accept security measures without being limited by them, to value normal experiences without taking them for granted, and to understand her position without letting it overwhelm her identity. As the school year drew to a close, Charlotte reflected on everything that had happened since that autumn morning when her world had suddenly felt dangerous and uncertain. She had discovered strengths she had not known she possessed. She had built genuine friendships based on mutual respect and affection. She had found activities that brought her joy and gave her confidence. The lessons Charlotte learned extended beyond academics. She understood that life would always include challenges and uncertainties, particularly given her royal position. However, she had also learned that challenges could be managed, that fear could be overcome, and that meaningful experiences were possible even within constraints. These insights would serve her well throughout the complex life ahead. On the last day of school, Shnala said goodbye to her teachers and classmates with mixed emotions. She was excited about summer break, but also sad to leave the environment where she had grown so much. Sophie and her other close friends promised to stay in touch during the holiday, and Charlotte knew she would make every effort to maintain these important connections. Charlotte's new protection officer drove her home that final day, and she thought about James and how much had changed since his departure. She had survived that transition and many others. She was stronger and more confident than she had been months earlier. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Charlotte believed she could face them with courage and grace, supported by family, friends, and the lessons she had learned from both difficult and joyful experiences.